And hello, everyone. Welcome to BlueDragon and our Human Organizational and Performance webinar series. I have my friend Dr. Bill Toth with me today, and we would like to share with you some of our thoughts on preventing costly human errors. We're going to go on for about 20 minutes, and then we'll be back to give you the chance to ask us questions live. Ask us on the chat. We'll be answering all your questions, comments. So you can chat throughout the webinar here, and we'll be happy to hear what you have to say about all of this. There's a lot of content here that we're going to provide in just 20 minutes. And so without further ado, let's get Bill back on here and start this webinar. I'm Rob De La Espriella, and we welcome you to this webinar on preventing costly recurring human errors. And Bill, say hello to everyone.
Good morning, Rob. We do all this setup, and it looks like we're side by side, but it's worth pointing out that we're in different locations entirely. But the magic of video and our recording capability makes us look like we're in the same room. So we're going to take full advantage of that today.
All right, well, let's get started here. And one of the things that we really want to kick off with is some really important work by James Reason from a long time ago, actually, and it's still relevant to this day. Bill, you're a resident expert on James Reason.
So one thing that it's incidental, but I want to point out, James Reason is still living. So he's one of these academics that you could send an email to and bounce your ideas off of and might possibly respond to you. So he's been around a long time, and he's talked about different theories regarding bad things that happen in organizations. And one of the ones that I've been really focused on recently and throughout my academic study is his ideas on human error. So I come from a safety and security background. Rob comes from more of a safety background, but also has security. So we have both of those. And in either case, poor quality means deficiency, and deficiency in these cases means vulnerability to either accident or to a malevolent event, which would be a security event. So James Reason's work looking at, first of all, it's predicated on his idea of the Swiss cheese model. And the Swiss cheese model is something that says between a state of energy and the state of a bad thing happening, we have a bunch of defenses. And those defenses have either latent defects, which is holes in the defenses, or they have active failures. And the way I think about that is somebody just comes along and blows a hole in it with a shotgun. So latent defects and active failures. But because they're multiple layers, the holes rarely line up, thankfully rarely line up. Sometimes they do, and when they do, the energy gets through, and then we have a really bad thing happening. In the security realm, we have theft of a critical asset. In the safety realm, we have an accident or God forbid, a death. So James Reason has put a lot of thought to organizationally how we set things up so that defenses are as robust as possible. When we talk about BlueDragon and the ideas in terms of root cause analysis and analysis of defenses, this is the best thing we can do. And I will slow down my long introduction here by saying that we can't predict specifically what's going to happen in complex systemic circumstances. We couldn't have predicted 9/11, although there are those that say that they did. We really can't predict the specific day and time of a 9/11 type event. So what can we do? We can go out and look at the defenses that keep these bad things from happening and make sure that the defenses have as much integrity as possible. Rob?
Yeah, and let me ask this question. How many defenses do you think you have at your operating facilities, right? If we're dealing with regulated environments, you have hundreds of procedures, and each of those have tens and hundreds of requirements. So we literally have thousands and tens of thousands of requirements, administrative requirements, that are defenses, as well as physical protections, physical barriers, right? Like lead shielding protects us against radiation. And then we have cyber controls, right? We have software controls, firewalls, things that keep our data safe, right? So we have all kinds of defenses, and that's the beauty of BlueDragon. We're taking a look at the whole thing as a system, lining up these defenses, because think about it this way. Humans are an infinite variable, right? If we're dealing with a problem, humans are in the equation as an infinite variable, creating infinite variations of events, right? But for anything to happen, any bad thing to happen, any event to happen, we had to have bypassed a lot of defenses, right? So we need to take a look at the system as a whole to understand what defenses didn't work for us, which ones were bypassed, which ones were weak, or which ones were missing. And I want you to think of the human in a bubble, right? So Bill and I have really developed this systems-based concept. And I want you to think of every organization is a system. Think of it as a big bubble. Inside the bubble at the core are the humans working within this bubble. And again, humans are behaving in many different ways. It's most of the time okay, sometimes erratically, sometimes they're pressured by external factors, right? And surrounding that human, we envelope that human with a lot of defenses. We have a layer of physical barriers. We have a layer of administrative requirements. We have a layer of management control systems, right? And these management control systems include cultural controls, right? Setting the tone for the culture at that organization, the values, the beliefs for the organization. So humans are sitting here inside this massive bubble, yet in some days, the human behavior combined with weaknesses in the equipment or the procedures or the organization or the culture, we have an event, right, Bill? And that's
Yeah.
why we have to take a systems approach to understanding what happened, especially when humans are involved.
And speaking of humans, I want to point out one other defense that sometimes people forget, and that defense is competent and aware humans. So if you've got a population, a plant or site population, organizational population that walks around in a fog, they're distracted by other things. They're not going to see bad things beginning to happen. Sometimes, and oftentimes, if you look at the case history, the person that prevents the bad thing from happening would saying, "Hey, that thing's out of whack. Something is wrong here. Somebody is in this organization that shouldn't be here." Or I hear a rattling of a valve that I didn't expect. And they alert authorities and people can intervene before a bad thing happens. So we we don't necessarily take credit for them in our vulnerability assessments and our mitigation plans, but they can be essential. So an aware and competent employee, aware of what normal should look like and aware of when we're getting out of normal, is essential as a defense.
Absolutely. And what Bill is leaning into is a key concept that's come out in the not too recent past here. It's called human and organizational performance. And there's five big tenets to HOP, which include, hey, people make mistakes. We know that. We're human, we're fallible, we're going to make human errors. However, tenet number two, blaming people doesn't work. Human error is not a root cause. That's something that you should not stop at and take action on. Behavior is going to be driven by the context in which it happened, ergo the systems-based approach, because as we explained, humans are in this layers of bubbles, layers of protection, and a lot of things had to have failed for those errors to result in events. Next, learning is key to improving. So we want to learn from these incidents, these events, and we must evaluate them. So we have incident investigations, mishap investigations, accident investigations, and we do that through our BlueDragon root cause analysis process. And lastly, tenet number five is the leadership response really matters. So you want to create an organization and a culture that wants to learn from its mistakes, a continuous improvement culture. You don't want to sit here and blame, shame, and retrain people every time they have a problem, right? That's the worst kind of environment to create. You want to create a culture where you invite people to let you know, hey, this happened, we made a mistake. How can we learn from it? How can we fix it? So we're getting into deep here, but one more quick thing. When we look at human errors in BlueDragon, we really focus on two key aspects, right? Because you can't observe what's between people's ears, right? You have no idea what's going on between their ears, but you can observe where people are taking at-risk behaviors, and that's where they're putting themselves and others at risk around them, and error-likely situations, and Bill just alluded to that. We need situational awareness to understand where folks are put in a position to fail, error-likely situations. The organization and the work environment set the people up to fail, and we evaluate those specifically when we go through a BlueDragon. So now, Bill, let's shift gears and talk about the costs. And I want to lead off by saying we've done a couple of studies with some of our clients. And at some of the nuclear weapons complex facilities where we work, the National Science Labs, I'm getting the sense from a couple of examples that the average cost of recurring problems, most of them human errors, are in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million a year based on 2,000 condition reports per year, right, of different grades of severity, significance. Imagine that. That's a hidden cost. There's no line item for these cost factors, right? But we've created a spreadsheet where you can actually go in and fill out the worksheet and calculate the hidden cost of your recurring issues on any given year. Now, I did another study with, for the first time, with a dual unit nuclear power utility. So 2 nuclear plants and the home office, the nuclear division, and we used the actual numbers for 2023. The hidden cost of recurring problems at a dual unit nuclear power station was $33.8 million. And they did not know that. Nobody calculates these numbers. And these are all on overhead, right? These are line items that you did not expect to spend money on, right? Addressing every single one of these thousands of condition reports. You didn't expect them, they're not accounted for, and it's costing you lots of resources, time, and money. Okay, so the cost is really enormous, but also, Bill, aren't there a lot more costs? Not just the money cost and the time and resource. There's a lot of hidden costs associated with events.
Yeah, and the one that jumps to mind, of course, is in the news a lot recently is Boeing. So you're talking about loss of reputational cost, which then can flow downstream into loss of contracts and loss of real money. But the situation at Boeing is that I've actually heard recently that there's an application that you can put on your phone that will determine whether, as you plan your travel, how to jump around and avoid Boeing aircraft.
Oh,
This is
no.
this is really terrible from a perspective of a airframer's reputation, because the airframers have really consolidated into some just a handful of really big makers, and Boeing is one of them. And if you're a traveler, or if they have a bunch of travelers that are actually trying to avoid Boeing aircraft, this can't help but hurt the bottom line. So their reputational cost is huge. Now, of course, the financial cost associated with scrap and rework, with rollouts like the Dreamliner that really weren't rollouts, and all of that stuff, which is schedule related and reputation related as well. These costs are huge in their own right. So just everybody can just watch the TV and say, hey, look, these are lapses in quality, lapses in attention, preference for one initiative over another, preference for profitability over quality. And all of these things distract us from the main goal, which is shoring up the defenses in highly complex systemic circumstances so that we don't have these kinds of problems. So,
What a great example. Yeah, I think everyone's heard of Boeing. Um, you probably haven't heard of other examples within the world that we work in, which is energy. Now, about every 5 to 10 years, the government, the Department of Energy, recompetes these large M&O contracts, the contracts that manage our national laboratories. And these are $20 billion contracts. And guess what? There's always this recurring life cycle where a new M&O comes in, they bid, they win the contract, and there's this wonderful honeymoon phase. Everything is great, and then errors start to happen. Issues start to pile up. The organization starts to take black eyes because they're not solving recurring problems, and the government loses trust and confidence in that M&O, and they rebid the contract, and a new person comes in. But this cycle repeats itself over and over, and the reality is they're not good. Organizations are not good at solving recurring, costly human errors. And what Bill's talked about, the loss of not just brand confidence, but regulatory confidence, public confidence, and along that, employee morale. All that has an adverse effect. And I've seen over and over and over large companies losing $20 billion contracts because they can't solve their problems, which brings us into the most advanced complex problem solving system that we know of because we built it. All right, Bill. BlueDragon, an integrated problem solving system. It's a 3-phased approach that is truly unique and truly way out in front of all of our competition. And so we have managed to integrate all kinds of traditional tools, the best elements of traditional tools, but we have leaned out all the waste. So we do have timelines from events and causal factors chartings. If you're familiar with 5 whys and fishbones, all those, the elements of those that are truly worthwhile, we've kept and are integrated. But we also bring in high reliability organization principles, critical thinking principles, systems theory, which my friend Bill here has been instrumental in bringing into BlueDragon. Once we got the bigger picture of a systems-based approach, BlueDragon really started to flourish. We talk about organizational development. So there's lots of things that we've integrated into the three-phase BlueDragon approach, and I'll just list them very quickly. In the first phase, we gather all the available data and event information, and we generate lines of inquiry questions that are focused, unbiased, and evidence-based. Then in phase two, we take those questions and do cause and effect analysis with the affected organizations, the key stakeholders. And once we identify the root causes through cause and effect, we go to phase three, the corrective action phase. And there we will coach the issue owners on key principles like the hierarchy of hazard controls to avoid just adding more administrivia into the equation and really focus on solutions that completely eliminate the problem. And then we talk about lean mistake proofing. And we also talk about to what extent we have to determine to what extent these root causes and contributors are affecting other parts of the organization or other humans or equipment operability, right? So it's a really comprehensive way to attack and solve problems, and there's nothing like it. We are working with a company now called Veritone. We're going to bring artificial intelligence into BlueDragon to help us out. So we are on the cusp of being AI powered here at BlueDragon. So I'm really excited about that. That's going to come out in January of 25.
Yeah. So coming back to where we started with James Reason, I'd like to go over roughly what he calls his generic error modeling system. This is a system where he talks about the categories of human error. So that you can follow along here or look it up for yourself. What he starts out with is unsafe acts. And so he has a safety kind of focus, but you could also put in security or insecure acts, which lead to bad things happening in the security realm. I think the application is quite good for both. The unsafe acts or insecure acts break down into two categories. First is unintended actions, things that people didn't intend. And the second one is intended actions. And this is where I get interested from a security professional standpoint. The intended actions are things that people, that introduces the idea of malevolence. People intended to do this kind of thing, and then we've got a whole different set of problems. The unintended actions break down into two subcategories, slips and lapses. The intended actions also break down into two categories, and they're mistakes or violations. So essentially, now we've branched it off and saying, if I have an unsafe or insecure act, if it's an intended action and it's a violation, now I'm starting to show a malevolence pathway, and I've got an inside person who is intending to do the wrong thing. Everything else is more benign, but still could be as impactful on human life. But they come down to unintended actions, slips or lapses, and then intended action, which was a mistake. And you could argue possibly that mistake is part of a sabotage type of situation. From there, it breaks down into more explanation as to what specifically Reason is talking about in each one of these categories. But I wanted to just sort of give a quick introduction to the generic error modeling system because it helps one come up with a good taxonomy on what kinds of human errors are out there in the world that we're trying to deal with, that we're trying to mitigate. Of course, as we go downstream from there, we look at the impact of the defenses on each one of those error categories. And then we go into kind of a BlueDragon application to find out whether the defenses are sufficient to mitigate that kind of issue. So that's kind of the generic error modeling system in a nutshell. And, I would encourage everybody to go out and look at it and kind of put your own organization in that context and see how it applies or whether it applies at all.
No, outstanding. And that goes to say that we believe BlueDragon can be used in criminal investigations as well as operational and manufacturing types of issues. Absolutely.
It wasn't exactly criminal, but we did do an analysis of the Rust shooting incident. And interestingly, and to sort of promote BlueDragon's effectiveness, what we came up with in the early stages based on openly available information is actually playing out to how the case is being prosecuted exactly right now in current time. So
14 months later. Okay, there was one more thing I wanted to leave you with before we close out, that we can do this proactively. And for that, we focus on the bow tie risk assessment model, which teaches us that we want to stay to the left side, the proactive side of an event, not the right side, the aftermath after the event where we're just reacting and doing root causes on that end. But we can evaluate the strength of the existing line of defenses compared to current performance, look for performance gaps, strengthen those defenses, and really strengthen the organization before an event takes place or not allowing events to take place. So the proactive use of all this is a great topic. We're going to do that some other time. But that's it for now. Bill, any parting thoughts?
I think you said it, Rob. The idea is what do you want to be as a citizen, as an employee? Do you want to be reactive and just sitting around waiting for something to happen and then scrambling around to find out why, or do you want to be proactive and getting out and saying, I understand my systems so well that I can determine what normal looks like and see when things are going out of normal, and then you're the hero because you jump in and take action before the real disaster actually happens. This is what we really are trying to foster. And so, BlueDragon points out the complexity and it points out opportunities where we can understand a normally operating system and understand when to jump in at the appropriate level. So, as Rob says, on that side, on that proactive side of the bow tie.
All right, so we welcome you to join us in another webinar in the near future on the proactive use of these complex problem-solving skills that we've developed. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. Okay, Bill. Well, that was great. So now, of course, appreciate the comments there, John Black. Appreciate you. And if there's any comments or questions, we'll stick around for a little bit. But this has been great. Hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't heard about human and organizational performance, HOP, there's websites on that. There's all kinds of blogs and material on the internet. And I really encourage everyone to start looking into it because that's truly at the heart of most organizational issues. It's not about equipment per se. Even equipment has human ties, human interactions with it. But understanding how to, in an integrated fashion, deal with the human errors, the organizational issues, the programmatic issues, the equipment issues, like BlueDragon does all at once. That's how you get to the real latent, deep-seated issues, all the way down to even the cultures. And not many, I don't know of any other methodology that integrates everything. We've recently been looking into the military standards for doing mishap and accident investigations. Unbelievable numbers of records with thousands of pages if you want to read through it, and it's all very separate. Same thing for the Department of Energy. And when it comes down to it, actually, the skills and techniques and tools that they teach, they're still teaching the antiquated stuff from the 1920s to the 1970s. Nothing any more modern than the 1970s. So think about how effective those things were, those tools and techniques for root cause analysis that were created in a previous century for another generation for different types of problems than we're facing today in the modern socio-technical work environment. So those were some of my parting thoughts. Bill, your thoughts before we close here?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is the what was apparent as we had this conversation was the tendency of people to find simple solutions to complex problems, and there's so much that happens underneath the media that people don't understand in industrial settings and so forth. But these high profile media um, presented events come to mind, and something happens like a violent school shooting or a terrible accident, and they say, well, it's all this, and then they throw in with solutions that chase after the single and simple explanation for complex systemic problems. We talked about human error in this webinar, and certainly the human is a big factor, and but it is a mistake to say it's all the human or it's all the technology. So when we talk about systems, we're talking about complex socio-technical systems, individuals and cultures, individuals and plant or organizational populations, plus the technologies that they are dealing with, all come together to present certain kinds of unique problems that are highly complex and very hard to understand. So I always kind of get uncomfortable when I see, particularly people that don't have any idea, like the media, about these circumstances, to say it's all this or it's all that, or they actually foster a conversation to pursue and chase after simple solutions. certain people are served by that. I mean, certainly if you are the vendor of some kind of technology that can mitigate a thing, the simple solution thing, then you stand to make some money off of it. But I think we really need to be careful about exactly that, trying to oversimplify um, circumstances which came from complex systemic issues. So sorry for all the words, but the basic idea is simple. The problems are not.
Well, great points, Bill. Thank you. Well, seeing no questions, I would like to close this out. And thank you everyone for attending. This video will be available through the YouTube channel, our training channel, the BlueDragon training channel, as well as on our website. We've also posted the hidden cost calculator link. That's also available through our website. We encourage you to download it and calculate what issues are costing your company on an annual basis, because that's how you can truly measure return on investment for any training program. Are you reducing the frequency and the severity of your issues so that you're saving money in terms of dealing with these issues year after year? With that, we look forward to seeing you in one of our future webinars. Thank you and have a great rest of the week. Happy holidays, by the way.